Okay, second test. We see, how do we get influence? We're asking, how does influence come to us in the workplace? It comes the same way it came to Joseph. We passed the betrayal test. The second test is the character test. The character test. Joseph was given position and promotion in Potiphar's house. And as it says in your notes, with promotion comes the testing of your character. That's the way it is. Every time promotion comes to us, every time God gives us a blessing of some kind and opens a door for us in that way, with that will come a fresh testing of your character. Proverbs says it this way: the crucible is for silver and the furnace for gold, and each is tested by the praise accorded to him. When you move into a position of praise, when you move into a position of promotion, when you move into a position where things are getting better for you, that is the time that a fresh attack will come against your character. We see it in the story of Joseph. Let's look here at verse 6, Genesis 39. It says, so he left everything, talking about Potiphar. He left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. So he makes Joseph the manager of everything, and in making him the manager, of course, he opens up to Joseph all kinds. Joseph could do all kinds of abusive things financially and all this kind of stuff, but no, he's a man of integrity. But it goes even deeper than that as the story goes on. It says this: now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire in Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, with me here my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God? And she spoke to Joseph day after day, and he did not listen to her to lie beside her or to be with her. So literally, this is a daily temptation he gets hit with. And when you get promoted, that's what happens. You move into another level, and until you draw the line, until you make the mark, until you say, this is it, this is the end, I'm putting the limit down here, until you take your stand, day after day, you'll be tempted. Are you going to compromise financially? Are you going to compromise morally? Are you going to use your power abusively? As a matter of fact, we look in our notes and we see these three major battlefields of the character. First one we see, number one, is sexual temptation. Pornography or affairs can destroy our influence on others. Now you might say to yourself, well, how does pornography destroy my influence on others? Because this is a secret sin. Nobody knows what I'm doing. Nobody sees what I'm doing. How is this going to impact my influence on other people? The way it impacts your influence on other people is this. When you engage in something that you know is contrary to the things God has built in your life, then you experience guilt. When you experience guilt, your heart of faith shrinks up. So here you're supposed to be a person of influence. Here you're supposed to be a person that's making an impact. But when this opportunity comes in front of you, instead of boldly diving into the opportunity, you look at it and you say to yourself, can I take this challenge? I'm not sure God is with me. Is God really with me if I have these secret things going on in my life? I'm not really sure. And so the opportunity presents itself, but instead of you being filled with courage, instead of you being filled with boldness, instead of you having the willingness to step out and to take the challenge, instead you shrink back. And so your influence is diminished on other people. What about affairs? What kind of impact does this have? Well, first of all, you have to understand, affairs always come out. It always happens over a period of time. Somebody knows. Somebody in the office figures out what's going on. Somebody in the work situation knows. Finally, your spouse figures out what's happening. Somebody always knows. And in the work situation, when a person looks at you as a person of influence and you're having an affair, you know what that does? They look and they say, if this guy would compromise the promise he made to his wife, or her, the promise she made to her husband, I really can't trust him in anything. Because if you would break that promise, what other promise would be more sacred in your life than that promise is? So if you'd be willing to break that promise, that person would be and so what happens? Your influence on the other people around you is shrunk away. So every time there's this promotion that occurs, we find sexual temptation, we find financial temptation, stealing destroys our ability to lead others, power temptation, abuse of power, power used for personal gain. You know, I just want to make a comment about one thing. You know, many times people in work situations, they'll make room in their life for having contact with people of the opposite sex in social situations that are inappropriate. I'm just going to give you my perspective on this. I think lunch between me and a woman who is not my wife, where we talk about a little business and sit there and talk together at the lunch, as far as I'm concerned, that's inappropriate behavior to be involved in. I'm not saying excluding women in any kind of way. I just think that it's possible to have more than one other person there at lunch, to have a few different people, or it's possible for us to meet during the work hours to deal with those business situations. But I'm saying for me to go out and have lunch as a husband or as a wife, to go out and have lunch with another man or another, and just kind of justify it that it's that within the work context, this is the way things are going to work. This is the situation that's going to be in. I just have a problem with that. I think it's exposing yourself to a temptation that is just totally unnecessary. It's not a requirement. You don't have to do it. You don't have to be brought into that situation. And I think you can really hurt yourself. I think financially, you know, I've talked with business people that they've said to me things like, they've said, you know, in our company, basically the attitude is this: if you can't figure out a way for to make your job pay for your vacation, you're not smart enough to be working there. You should be able to figure out a way to pad your expense account, to do these different kinds of things, to get the company to have to pick up this other kind of stuff. And it just steals your place of influence. You know, Oral Roberts was the president of Oral Roberts University, or I should say Richard Roberts was the president of Oral Roberts University. And they've gone through a terrible shakeup there. And the shakeup that happened, and I understand it, you know, because Richard Roberts was brought up in this place. His father started the thing. The whole time it would be very easy for him to begin to think of the resources of that organization as his personal resources. But the truth is they're not. And instead of having the scrupulous carefulness that he needed to have, he used resources of the organization to benefit himself personally. And, you know, it may not have been a huge thing or anything else, but it was enough that it's caused him now to lose a tremendous place of influence because he wasn't scrupulous about the financial issues that were involved in that situation. You know, we think about positions of power. And let me just say to you, my approach to being in positions of leadership over people. Some people, when they're in leadership, they use people up for their cause. And my perspective is the job of a leader is to build up his followers. Build up the followers through good training. Build up the followers. Strengthen who they are. And you're going to be able to go a long way. You use people up. But that's what happens so many times. Every time you move up in influence, every time you move up, every time you're promoted in some way, you have choices in all these different areas. How you're going to treat people, how you're going to relate, what's going to happen, and how you deal with that, it determines whether or not God can extend your influence in your life. We're talking about how we get influence at work.